Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name's Kris. I'm an Australian GP, and it's been a weird time, this pandemic, for us GPs. Actually, it's been a weird time for all of us doctors, especially here in Australia, but I do not doubt everywhere else as well. In particular, I've heard a lot of ridiculous rumours about doctors, and especially GPs during the pandemic, and a lot of untruths about what we are and aren't allowed to do. I see a lot of these on social media, and I've been very tempted to respond sometimes. But of course, that opens up a can of worms, so let's just show my face instead and talk about it. I am a little bit nervous about making this video, and I'm not trying to call out anyone and say anyone's lying maliciously or anything like that. I just want to clear up a couple of untruths and misconceptions that I've seen commonly circulating. A quick note that some of these may sound similar to one another. It's just the very common variations that I read and that I see and that I do here. So if it sounds like I've already said something, it's just a twist. So the very first one I want to address is we aren't gagged by the government. I'm going to talk on behalf of GPs, but please do realize as well, I am one GP and I cannot talk for the thousands of GPs in Australia. We are all individual with our own values and our own employment structure. That being said, the majority of GPs are self-employed and self-contracted. I say that to tell you that we're not hired by the government, so they don't really have that power over us, if you will. Yes, we absolutely follow guidelines that can be set by the state or federal governments, especially for something like COVID, because we want a standard of care and we want it to be evidence-based. I'm not gagged and I am allowed to say my opinion. I am also allowed to practice in a way that suits me, whether it's COVID related or not. So for example, if I did not believe in contraception, for example, and I was a conscientious objector of contraception, I as a GP can practice that way. There are some rules, like I do have to pass someone along to someone who might be able to provide that service for a patient. And it's the same with COVID as well. We are allowed to practice what we're comfortable with and not practice what we're not comfortable with, as long as it doesn't put anyone in danger. So I can't see someone having a heart attack and go, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm gonna, you do have a duty of care. Personally, I'm a big proponent of evidence-based medicine, so I am going to follow guidelines for that reason. But that's just my personal take. So the big one, and the reason I really made this video, is there is a rumour that we are at risk of losing our licenses if we advise against the vaccine. I want to address a video of a very well-respected GP who was interviewed and stated a couple of things. Well, basically, during the interview, she was asked if she thought lockdown should end, and she was like, I can't comment on that, and then alluded to the fact that she would lose her job, or we as GPs aren't allowed to, and that sort of thing. She then pulled up the APRA position statement on it, and I'm going to read it out here. Any promotion of anti-vaccination statements or health advice which contradicts the best available scientific evidence or seeks to actively undermine the national immunisation campaign, including via social media like this, is not supported by the national boards and may be in breach of the codes of conduct and subject to investigation and possible regulatory action. Any doctor worth their salt would be amiss to go against the best available scientific evidence, right? It would be foolish to undermine the national scheme. Do I personally think that the vaccine rollout has been fantastic in Australia? No, absolutely not. However, I'm not going to undermine it because it helps no one. And my role is to do the best for my patients with the available information and structures available. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's been crappy. I mean, it hasn't been fantastic, and I am allowed to say that. It doesn't mean that I'm sitting to my patients and saying, we're not going to follow it, this is dangerous, blah, 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 because that's actually dangerous in itself, to undermine the regulatory suggestions. Like, it's just, any doctor worth their salt surely understands that. Plus, what the statement says is that APRA does not support doctors who do that, and that it may be in breach of the codes of conduct. Obviously, this is for investigation if deemed necessary. And you may be investigated, and you may have action taken afterwards. Not that if you speak out, you will have investigations happen, and you will have your license taken away or anything. It doesn't say that, so there was a big assumption, a big leap of logic there. Again, I'm not trying to undermine by any means what she was saying. Interpretations are unfortunately not objective as they are subjective sometimes, but this is how I'm reading it, and I'm in full agreement with it. I mean, we should want doctors to abide by best practice and best medical evidence. We should want doctors to practice in accordance with a code of conduct, and we should aim to provide that care for our patients so that if you're treated for condition X in Darwin versus Catherine versus Perth versus Wagen versus Sydney versus Wagga Wagga versus Mackay versus Townsville, wherever in Australia, it's the same outcome. You should not be disadvantaged because of where you are, and that's why we have guidelines, and that's why we have codes of conduct, and that's why we have all of this. Nowhere in that statement did it say that I'm gagged. Yes, there is another statement that I will read. Health practitioners are reminded that it is an offence under the national law to advertise a regulated health service, including on social media, in a way that is false, misleading, or deceptive. Advertising that includes false, misleading, or deceptive claims about COVID-19, including anti-vaccination material, may result in prosecution by APRA. This is to stop people saying things like, if I prescribe you antibiotic X, it is going to cure your genital warts. Something that is not proven by science. False advertising is wrong, and I hope that we can all agree on that. That's what this clause is for. So if I sit here and I spew things about COVID-19 changing DNA, which has been scientifically disproven again and again and again, and say that it doesn't work, which has been disproven because we've seen the rates of hospitalizations drop as vaccination goes up, and it's not because Omicrons are milder, and milder doesn't mean mild, but anyway, that's another rant. I have lost my train of thought because I got on a little tangent, but what I'm saying is that statement is to prevent false advertising and blatantly lying. As doctors, we have the privilege of the knowledge that we've gathered over what could be decades of practice. We have the trust of the people. We are still human, so I don't think we should be held on a pedestal at all. But we should not abuse our position because we have the ability to. That's just wrong. This is why we have regulatory bodies. Conveniently, and I'm going to read back on this as well, the doctor I mentioned before didn't read the part of the position statement that stated that if you are a conscientious objector, you are welcome to not vaccinate, though they do encourage, like I kind of alluded to before, that you should then point your patient in the direction of where they can get vaccinated should that be their choice. It also states, as is the same for any conscientious objection, that you should not push your own personal beliefs onto someone else, even if your own personal beliefs are not based in science or anything like that, or especially if they're not based in science, for example. But it doesn't matter. Whatever your personal beliefs are, it should not matter to the care, and that's what we want. No matter which doctor treats condition X, no matter which state in this country, they should all get the same care. That's what that statement's for, in my very humble opinion. Moving on, because obviously I got a little bit riled up and this is why I'm making this video. Anyway, the next common misconception that I read is that we've been told to hide negative outcomes and things about the vaccine. Now again, I am but one of several thousands of GPs in this country, so I can only speak for myself. But I do work in a practice of 10 plus doctors and I have lots of doctor friends. So again, it's a small proportion of the GPs in Australia, but alas, even in my social media campaigns and the GPs I've met there, not a single one of us has received any emails or letters that say, if you talk about the negative outcomes of the vaccine, XYZ bad thing will happen. Not a single one. Vaccinations, like every medicine, including paracetamol that people take regularly, or aspirin, or even the multivitamins or vitamins or natural remedies and herbal remedies that you take, can have side effects. Absolutely. And they are very well listed and they are very well documented, the vaccine ones I'm talking about now. We're not hiding that. Yeah, people feel cruddy after having a vaccine. We know why. It's the vaccine causing an immune response and your body's response to that. That's why they get fever and sore lymph nodes and all of that. We're not hiding it. And no one has come to us and said, don't say a bad thing about it or else. Yeah, that's why we consent, and it's informed consent. You may have XYZ happen. The truth is, though, if you don't get vaccinated and you get COVID, you could also have XYZ plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other things happen. So yeah, we're not gagged. We're not told not to talk negatively about the vaccine. We're just told to tell you the facts and you make up the decision for yourself. There's also been something circulating that every doctor around, at least in my local area, has received a letter of warning that we're not vaccinating enough or the numbers aren't high enough and that people are starting to understand the truth and we have to push our blah, 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 blah. No, just like I said before, no emails, no messages. The only letters I've received have actually been threats from patients who don't sign. It's concerned citizen that signs it, saying that if we do not stop vaccinating, and they address it personally, so dear Dr. Kris, if you don't stop vaccinating, you are in breach of the Geneva Convention and all these sorts of things, and that by civil law you will be arrested, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The police now have that letter because it was a threat, and everyone in my practice got it, and I think everyone in town did. And I can see on my social media platforms that I am on with other GPs, a lot of them got them interstate too. Fine, but that's the only threat or the warnings that I've been receiving is from people who are, I assume by all of that, anti-vax. Not by APRA or ATAGI or anyone like that. There's also a rumour that we're being paid, especially under the table, to vaccinate and to push the COVID propaganda and all of that. So the financials, let's break it down. As GPs, especially those of us who are self-employed and contracting our services to a clinic, we get paid by our patients. So if you see me and I provide a service, you then pay the clinic, let's say $87, which is probably the average. Because we live in Australia and we have Medicare, the government has decided that it will subsidise part of your visit to encourage people to be able to access medical care. So you will get back $40-something from that visit. So the out-of-pocket is $30-something. I then get, in my clinic, at 60% of that. The other 40% goes to the practice to employ our nurses, our reception staff, our practice manager, pay our electricity, our water, our security, our, the actual, devices and the programs and things like that, our cleaners, our equipment, everything else. So without having a doctor work, the practice won't get any money. And that's basically, so our wage covers the wage of everyone else, or our income covers the wage of everyone else. Does that kind of make sense? I have done a whole video on it if you're curious. When something is bulk billed, so let's say I charge you $100, if the government will cover 100% of that, so $100, you pay nothing. Technically, what should happen is that you tap your card or pay cash, $100, then the government comes in at that time and gives you $100 back. We avoid all that because it's a lot of work for nothing, so we just say, you're all good and you can go, and we just charge Medicare. That's because we should have charged you and Medicare should have paid you, but anyway, we just make it a bit easier. When the vaccine started to roll out, the government decided that no Australian should pay for the vaccine to prevent them getting sick from COVID, which is fantastic and I think a wonderful idea. It's very similar to the childhood immunisations. If you're on the schedule, you will pay nothing. Your child will get vaccinated for free. I love it. Remove the barriers. So when we vaccinate someone against something like COVID-19, there is the expectation that it will cost nothing for us to do so. So we don't charge patients for the visit, and the government pays for the vaccine. So yeah, I guess technically we do get paid by the government to vaccinate, when technically we could charge you and then have the government pay you back, but that's a whole, it's too much work. So yeah, we are paid to vaccinate, just like we are paid if we bulk bill you for any other visit. For full transparency, for the first dose, I think we get about $30, which again is split 60%, whatever. It depends on your contract yourself with your clinic. The second dose is 20 something and the third dose is $10. So it sounds like a lot of money per vaccine, and it can be, absolutely, if you're doing lots and lots. But that's not accounting for the extra hour of work it takes to draw up the vaccines, the work it takes to ensure people are okay when they're getting vaccinated, make sure they're consented, make sure any side effects are dealt with. Should also consider the fact that there's extra nursing staff and extra reception staff that then do those clinics. So it's really just to keep things afloat. We don't make money from these vaccinations as like a profit. It's not like we're raking in an extra $100,000 a year or anything like that. We're just getting paid for doing our job and doing our service, which is what we do anyway. Then there is one that is very controversial, which is that we have to give you an exemption if you've had COVID and haven't been vaccinated for what is now 4 months. It is true that someone may be able to get an exemption for not having the COVID vaccination, any of the 3 now 4 available, if they have had COVID, tested positive on a PCR, so not a rat test, and it doesn't matter if it's serologically tested, so blood test or not, for up to 4 months. This previously was 6 months, it's now gone down to 4. That is true, it is possible, but it is not necessary and it's not mandated, and we don't have to. This is per ATAGI, the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisations. It is also true that there are other valid reasons why people may not be able to get a COVID vaccination and may be temporarily or permanently exempt from getting one. However, these circumstances are very rare. So we as doctors do not have to do that if we do not believe it is in your best interest. So when you've had an infection, again, COVID or anything, your natural immunity is up because your body has fought and then ultimately defeated or gotten rid of the virus. So you will have a natural immunity for a time. Natural immunity is really no better than vaccinated immunity. I mean, in some studies it can give you a little bit more protection. However, it wanes. And once the 4-month or the 6-month period is passed, and it varies depending on ages and your past medical history and things like that, hence why it seems like the goalposts keep changing, then you're back to nothing. Whereas having a vaccinated immunity keeps you covered for longer. Yes, we know they're waning, and that's why now we have 3rd doses and booster shots and all of that, but we're evolving with the science. So yes, like I said, you may have a natural immunity, but that boosts when you get vaccinated. So why wouldn't you want the best possible immunity by having an infection and then when you're better, getting a vaccine so you do not have to get sick again, even if it was mild? Getting sick sucks. We're trying to avoid that because right now in our hospitals, we are still having babies born, kids getting sick, bones being broken, car accidents happening, appendixes bursting, mental health breakdowns. We are still having all the stuff we had before, and we're still as busy as we were before, and now we've got this on top of it that was just unprecedented, to be the word of the year. We can give you an exemption if we think it is medically required. Can, not have to. The only time we should give you an exemption, and I'll read this directly, is if you are provided with monoclonal antibody or convalescent plasma therapy for COVID. That is the only time we have to or we should give you an exemption. Should and have to are very different as well, not can. Can is also very, very different. I'm going to read this because there are basically only a few reasons people should get an exemption. So, like I said before, if you've been given monoclonal antibody or convalescent plasma therapy for COVID, if you've had an inflammatory cardiac illness in the last 3 months, but this is temporary and after 3 months has passed, you can get the COVID vaccine. An acute major illness or surgery, but this is temporary and you can get vaccinated once you've been discharged and you're feeling better. If you've got COVID, but this is temporary and you can get vaccinated once you're feeling better. And if you've had serious side effects before. However, there are now 4 on the market, so you have a variety to choose from. 2 of them are similar, so the Moderna and the Pfizer, but AstraZeneca, Novavax, and those 2, the mRNA ones, are all very different, so you have a variety still to choose from. And finally, that we as doctors or GPs get fined, investigated, or otherwise disciplined if we give you an exemption for masks or vaccines. Nope. If you've made a clinical judgment, then you've made a clinical judgment. That's what we do every single day. There are some bodies that are going around and questioning it and looking at the legitimacy, and I think that's very valid as well, because this is a reflection activity. This is making sure that guidelines are being followed. This is making sure that we as a profession are giving a uniformed response. We need to tailor things to our patients, right? So what I do for Mrs. X and what someone else does for Mr. Y might be very different because of their different backgrounds, and that's okay. So yeah, we may be looked into and investigated in that regard, but that's not a scary thing. Also, if we give exemptions, it doesn't mean that other private businesses have to follow our advice and say this person doesn't need to wear a mask or be vaccinated. They're private businesses and they can do what they want. I look at it like in some restaurants. If you're wearing no shirt, no service. In some places, you have to wear enclosed shoes. It's just the rules. Maybe I'm just a rule follower and I don't question things too much, and maybe I should question things more, but I like to think that I do have a healthy dose of skepticism and that I think for myself, and I just happen to agree for the most part with a lot of what's going on. So there you go. There's a couple of very common myths that I hear. I hope everyone can stay respectful, and I hope everyone understands that my passion is not anger against people who are saying these things. It's about misinformation and just protecting our patients. If you believe something like this and this is your first time hearing about it, that's okay. It's okay if this is the first time you've questioned something. It's okay if this is the first time you've heard our perspective. It doesn't make you a bad person, and I don't think less of you. It's also okay if this is the first time you've heard any of these rumors and you're like, whoa, I didn't know people thought about that. It's all good. We're in different walks of life. We're at different stages of life, and we've got very different perspectives, especially in this pandemic. So I have a lot of pent-up frustration, and instead of going on Facebook and responding, I thought I'd make a video and just generalize it. Because again, I'm not angry at the individuals who are saying these things. If this is what they truly believe, I'm happy to accept that that's what they believe, and they've come to this belief with the information they have at hand. This is me providing more information. Anyway, that's gonna do it for today's video. It's been long enough, probably my longest video in a long time. If you've enjoyed it, hit like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you want from me next, all those YouTubey things. But until next time, guys, do stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you in a video very soon.